You want to know something that made me genuinely angry? I started digging into why modern cars break down so fast, why a brand new vehicle with 60,000 miles on it needs a $2,000 repair that makes zero mechanical sense. And the deeper I went, the angrier I got. Because what I found wasn't incompetence. It wasn't bad engineering. It was a decision, a cold, calculated, deliberate decision to make sure your car never lasts long enough to stop you from buying another one. And now, they're coming after the cars that proved it was possible to do better. The classics, the old iron, the machines that last. Stick with me. Because by the end of this video, you're going to look at your new car very differently. Let me take you back to the 1960s for a second. Engineers back then were building engines out of thick cast iron, simple designs, wide tolerances, carburetors you could rebuild on a kitchen table with a $12 kit from the parts store. A well-maintained car from that era, it could run for 40, 50 years. Some of them are still running today. And that right there, that's the problem. Not for you, for them. If your car lasts 40 years, you're not buying another one for 40 years. And a customer who doesn't buy is a customer who costs them money. So, somewhere in a boardroom, I'm not guessing, this is documented, the automotive industry made a shift. The question stopped being, how do we build the best car possible? And started being, how do we build a car that needs us again? And they answered that question brilliantly. They started adding complexity, not because the complexity made the car better, but because complexity creates failure points, and failure points bring you back to the dealership. A car from 1969 had maybe a dozen things in its electrical system that could go wrong. A car from 2024 has between 50 and 150 separate computer modules, each one a ticking clock, each one something you cannot fix yourself, each one something that requires their tools, their software, their labor rates. That's not progress, that's a trap. And we walked right into it. Okay. So planned obsolescence. That's been going on for decades. That's old news to some of you. But here's what changed recently, and this is the part that actually made my jaw drop when I found it. They added surveillance. Your new car, 2022, 2023, 2024, is not just a machine anymore. It's a data collection device that also happens to move you from point A to point B. It tracks where you go. It records how hard you brake, how fast you accelerate, what time you leave the house, what time you come home. And some manufacturers, General Motors was caught doing this, were quietly selling that driving behavior data directly to insurance companies. Without telling their customers, people were opening their insurance renewal letters and seeing their premiums go up, or habits they never agreed to have monitored. That's not a bug. That's a feature, a revenue feature. And it gets worse. There's a system coming called OBD3. Right now, your car has an OBD2 port. You can plug a device in, read your own data. A mechanic, even one you trust, can access it. OBD3 removes that. Under OBD3, your car continuously broadcasts its own data to government regulatory servers. No plug required, no appointment. The car reports on itself, in real time, always. And if those reports don't meet the standard, the car gets flagged. In the most extreme versions of this proposal, it gets remotely disabled. Think about what that means. The government, or whoever controls that server, has an off switch for your vehicle. Now tell me honestly, where does a 1967 Mustang fit in that system? It doesn't. There's no port, no modem, no firmware, no off switch. And that is why they want it gone. I want to talk about Minnesota for a minute, because there's a bill, HF 3865, introduced in 2026, and the title sounds completely harmless. Authority to operate collector vehicles. Technical changes made. Boring, right? Sounds like paperwork, that's the point. The boring-sounding bills are the dangerous ones, because nobody reads them. Here's what's actually in it. In Minnesota right now, Collector cars are already limited to Saturdays and Sundays only, sunrise to sunset, and only for official events, exhibitions, parades, shows. You want to drive your classic car on a Tuesday morning? That makes you a criminal. In your own vehicle, on a public road, a criminal. And HF 386-5 builds the legal framework to tighten that even further. Now, some of you are thinking, I don't live in Minnesota. This doesn't affect me. I thought the same thing about California 10 years ago. Look at California now. Any collector car from 1976 onwards has to go through a special referee program just to be recognized as a collector vehicle. And the second you modify it, the second you personalize it, you lose that status. Look at London. Ultra-low emission zones with daily charges so steep that driving an older vehicle into the city becomes financially impossible. Paris, Berlin, same story. They don't ban the car, they just make using it unbearable until you give up and let it rot. And here's what nobody in these legislative hearings is being honest about. A classic car that sits too long dies. Rubber seals dry out and crack without circulating fluid. Fuel turns to varnish and clogs the system. Metal surfaces oxidize without an oil film protecting them. The restriction is the execution, slow, legal, and completely deniable. Let me step back from the politics for a second, because this isn't just about cars. SEMA, the Specialty Equipment Market Association, says the classic and collector car industry supports over 1 million American jobs, restoration shops, machine shops, parts manufacturers, upholstery specialists, chrome platers, paint guys. These aren't jobs you can outsource. These aren't jobs a robot can do. These are skilled trades built on knowledge passed from one person to another over decades. When the right to drive a classic car disappears, the market for restoring one disappears with it, and those skills, gone. But it's even bigger than jobs. There's a kind of knowledge that comes from working on a purely mechanical machine. When something goes wrong with an old car, you figure it out. You listen to the engine, you smell the exhaust, you put your hands on it, and you diagnose it with your brain and your experience. That relationship between a man and his machine that's being deliberately engineered out of existence. Because in the new world they're building, you don't diagnose, you don't repair, you don't understand. You bring it to the dealer, you wait in the lounge, you pay what they tell you to pay, you go home. That's not ownership, that's a lease you paid full price for. I know what the other side says. Classic cars pollute, they're bad for the environment. We need to get them off the road. Okay, let's look at the actual numbers. Classic cars account for less than 0.1% of total miles driven in the United States. Every year, less than 0.1%. One single long-haul freight truck running 120,000 miles a year puts out more real emissions than every collector car driven in Minnesota combined. If this was genuinely about emissions, the math would point at freight trucks, at commercial fleets, at industrial sources, not at a guy driving his 1969 Camaro to a car show on a Saturday morning. Even Transport for London, one of the most aggressive emissions regulators on the planet, still maintains exemptions for historic vehicles because they looked at the data and concluded the environmental impact is negligible. So if the impact is negligible, and the bills are still being written, then emissions is not the real reason. The real reason is what I told you in part 2. They can't put a chip in it, they can't update it, they can't track it, they can't turn it off. And in the world they're building, a machine they can't control is a machine they can't allow. Here's what I want you to take away from this. The reliable car didn't disappear because engineers forgot how to build one. It disappeared because a car that lasts forever is a terrible business model for people who need you to keep buying. And the classic car the last proof that they used to build things differently, is being quietly legislated out of existence, not because it's dangerous, not because it pollutes, but because it doesn't fit into a system built on dependency, data, and control. Minnesota is not the end of this story. It's the beginning. And the only people who are going to slow it down are the ones paying attention right now. Subscribe if this matters to you. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And the next time someone tells you classic cars are an environmental problem, ask them why a 1969 Camaro that drives 1,000 miles a year needs to be regulated before a freight truck doing 120,000. See how long it takes them to answer.